I told her, plain as I could stand at my own gate, I need a ranch hand more than I need a wife, ma'am, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise. She looked at me a long moment with the dust of 40 miles on her, and she said, "Good. I'd make a poor wife and a fine hand, and I'd sooner be hired than rescued." That was the first true thing Susanna Coyne ever said to me, and near 30 years later, standing at the head of Antelope Fork with the snow coming down on a grave I dug too soon, I'd have told you it was the truest. But I'm getting ahead. An old man does that. Let me go back to the start of it, to the autumn the place near broke me, before she ever rode up that road. My wife Margaret died on a Tuesday in the spring of my 40th year, and the doctor out of Cawley couldn't tell me much except that her heart had been weak in a way none of us had known to look for, and that there was nothing in his bag or anybody's that would have changed it. We'd had no children that lived. We'd had the place, the marsh place my father's before me, 1,000 acres of grass and timber and cold running water under Iron Mountain, and we'd had each other, and I'd thought that was a fortune that couldn't be spent. I learned different. A man can be richer than his neighbors and poorer than a beggar in the same hour, and I was, that whole first year, both. I ran the cattle alone after that. I told the few hands I'd kept that I didn't need them, which was a lie I told to save the cost and also to save the bother of faces at my table. I rose before the light and worked till I couldn't see my own hands, and I slept hard and dreamed of nothing, which suited me. 3 summers went by like that. The place got ahead of me a little more each one. A man alone can hold 1,000 acres the way. A man alone can hold back a river, for a while, by main strength, until the strength gives. That third autumn it commenced to give. I'd lost a stretch of fence on the north line and never mended it, and a dozen head drifted off into the breaks and I only found 9. The hay came in light because I'd cut it late, being one man with one team. I looked at the loose hay in the barn and I looked at the size of the herd, and I did the arithmetic a cattleman does in October, and the arithmetic said I would lose stock that winter for want of hands. Not because I didn't know how. Because I was one man, and the mountain doesn't care how stubborn you are. It snowed on the 9th of October that year, early and mean, and melted off by noon, and that little warning was the Lord tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Eli, you fool, you cannot do this any more." I rode into Cawley to find a hand and found none. The young men were off to the silver or the railroad, and the steady ones were spoke for. I sat my horse in front of the mercantile feeling every one of my 43 years. An old prude who kept the store came out and leaned on the post and said, "You want help, Marsh. You want it bad enough. You'll take it in whatever shape it comes." I didn't know then what shape it would come in. I rode home empty-handed and stewed about it for 2 days, and on the 3rd day, near sundown, a wagon came up my road that I didn't know. She drove it herself. That was the first thing I marked before her face, before anything, a woman handling a tired team up a bad grade with the easy hands of somebody who'd done it 10,000 times. The wagon was loaded poor. A trunk, a few sticks of furniture lashed under canvas, a milk cow on a lead behind, ribs showing. No man anywhere about it. She pulled up at my gate and set the brake and looked down at me where I stood with a coil of wire in my hands, and she didn't smile and she didn't beg. She said, "Are you Eli Marsh, that runs this place alone?" "I am." "Prude at the store said you were looking for a hand and couldn't find one. I'm looking for a place and can't find one. My name's Susanna Coyne. I had a claim on the far side of Cawley that my husband filed and didn't live to prove, and the land office is taking it back come the new year because a widow can't hold it alone. That's the law's idea of mercy. I have a cow, a team, what's in that wagon, and 2 good hands, and I know cattle and horses and a garden and a sick animal in the night. I don't know how to be pitiful, and I won't learn for you or anybody." She stopped. The team blew. "I'm asking for work and a roof, Mr. Marsh, not charity. There's a difference, and I'd be obliged if you remembered it." I'd had 3 years of nobody at my gate but the wind. I stood there with the wire cutting into my palm, and I'll tell you what went through me, because I'm too old now to dress it up. The first thing was no. The flat animal know of a man who's built a wall and means to die behind it. The second thing, right on its heels, was the arithmetic, the loose hay, the open north line, the 9 head where there should have been 12, the snow on the 9th of October. And the third thing, which I didn't like and couldn't shake, was that she'd said I won't learn to be pitiful for you in the exact voice my Margaret would have used. The voice of a woman who's been knocked down enough times to know that the only thing she truly owns is the way she stands back up. It ain't proper, I said. A woman living on a man's place that isn't kin to him. Cawley would talk you into a corner inside a week. Cawley talks anyway, she said. I've been talked about by experts. Talk doesn't feed a cow. No, I allowed, it don't. We stood there. The light was going off the mountain the color of a bruise healing. And because I am a plain man and not a clever one, I said the only thing I could think to say that would let her work and keep the both of us out of the worst of the talking, and it came out cruder than I meant. There's a way it'd be proper, I said. If we married, in name, you'd have my name which stops the talk and you'd have the laws standing so nobody can run you off anything. I'd have the hand I need. We'd keep it a business. Your wagon, your cow, your trunk, your say, all yours, kept in your own name, and I'll put that on paper with a lawyer if you want it. I need a hand more than I need a wife, ma'am, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise. She looked at me a long moment with the dust of 40 miles on her, and she said, good. I'd make a poor wife and a fine hand, and I'd sooner be hired than rescued. Put it on paper, all of it, and one thing more. She climbed down off that wagon and stood in front of me, not tall, but she didn't give an inch of what height she had. The house gets a line down the middle. You're half my half. You don't cross it, and I don't, not for any reason, until and unless we both of us decide different, and we may never. I'm not for sale, Mr. Marsh, not by the head and not by the acre, and a ring doesn't change that. Are we agreed? We're agreed, I said. Then where do I put my cow? Said Susanna Coyne, before she falls over dead in your road. That's how it started. Not with a fire and not a flood and not a man stepping between a woman and the cruelty of the world. It started with arithmetic and a milk cow and a line drawn down the middle of a house, 2 stubborn people striking a bargain that neither would call by its right name because neither one believed, that first cold evening, that it had a right name at all. We married in Cawley 11 days later, in the front room of the Methodist preacher with Prout and Prout's wife for witnesses, and the lawyer's paper signed and filed the same afternoon, her cow, her team, her trunk, her claim money when it finally came through, all of it hers in her name to the end of her days or the end of mine. The preacher's wife cried a little because she didn't know better, and Susanna shook my hand when it was done, a good firm shake, like we'd bought and sold a horse fair and were both satisfied. The whole of Cawley had it inside the day that Eli Marsh had got himself a mail-order widow off a failed claim, and they were wrong on every count, and I found I didn't care what they said, which was the first new thing I'd felt in 3 years. We rode home in her wagon with my saddle horse tied behind. Neither of us spoke much. The mountain came up dark on our right hand, and she looked at it the way a person looks at something they mean to learn. That fence on your north line's down, she said, when we were near home. I could see it from the grade. How long's it been open? Since August. And you've drifted stock through it. 3 head, found 9 of 12. She didn't say anything to shame me, which I'd half braced for. She said, we'll get it tomorrow first thing before we do anything else. Open fence in October is money walking off a hill. And that we, careless, businesslike, not the least bit tender, was the first stitch of the thing that took us the rest of our lives to sew. The line down the middle of the house was real. She took the 2 rooms off the kitchen, the small bedroom that had been a storeroom and the kitchen itself, which she said a hand earns the right to by feeding everybody, and I kept the big room and the room that had been Margaret's and mine, which I shut and didn't go into. We met at the table. We met in the barn and the corral and out on the grass. We did not meet anywhere else, and for a long while I'd no more have crossed into her half of the house then I'd have walked off the mountain in the dark. But here is what I learned that first autumn, working 1,000 hard acres beside a woman I'd married and didn't know. She had not boasted. We got the north fence by noon the next day, the two of us, and she set posts like a man half her age and strung wire without tearing her hands the way I always did. And she found me the 3 lost head inside a week by reading the country better than I could, picking out where a cow would shelter in a draw I'd ridden past 100 times. She doctored a steer with a torn flank using a poultice her mother had taught her, and it healed clean where I'd have lost it. She turned the light hay we had into more than I'd have gotten out of it, rigging a feed plan, cutting the herd's worst keepers to sell off before the snow so we'd carry only what we could winter. By the time the real cold came down off Iron Mountain in November, we were ready for it in a way I had not been ready for anything in 3 years, and I knew, lying awake on my side of the line, that I'd lose no stock that winter that I hadn't planned to lose. One man cannot hold 1,000 acres. 2 people who know their work can hold it easy and have grass left over. We didn't talk much those first weeks. We were both of us out of the habit, but you cannot work beside somebody dawn to dark, week on week, and not start to learn them the way you learn a horse, not from anything they say, but from the 100 small things they do. I learned that Susanna hummed under her breath when she thought she was alone, old hymns, always a half-tone flat, and stopped the second she caught herself. I learned she gave the meanest old mossy horn cow in the herd a name, Duchess, and slipped her extra, and would have denied it on a Bible. I learned that some evenings she'd stand out on the porch a long while after the work was done, looking off east the way she'd come, and that on those evenings I'd best leave her be. And I learned, the way you learn the worst things, that there was a grief in her the equal of mine, because one night I heard her crying through the wall, low and trying not to, and the next morning at the table neither of us said a word about it, and I poured her coffee before she asked, which was the most I knew how to do. She'd had a child. I worked that out slow, from a thing here and a thing there, a little wooden horse she kept in her trunk that I saw once when the lid was up, a way she had of going quiet near the Prout children when we went to town. I never asked. She told me herself, finally, in December, on a still night when the cold was so deep the trees cracked like rifle shots out in the dark, and we sat at the table later than usual, because neither of us could face the long cold walk to our separate beds. She told me she'd had a boy, and that he and her husband had both been taken in the same hard week by a sickness that ran through their settlement, the winter before she came to me, and that the claim and the failure of it was almost a mercy, because it gave her something to do with her hands besides bury people. I didn't say I was sorry. Sorry's a small coin, and she'd been handed a sack of it by people who didn't mean it. I told her about Margaret, the weak heart nobody knew to look for, the Tuesday, the children we never had. I told her the place had been killing me by inches for 3 years and I'd been letting it, and that her wagon coming up my road was the first time in all that while I'd had a reason to want the morning to come. I'd never said that to a living soul. I'd never had a soul to say it to. The fire popped. She looked at me across the table, across the line that ran invisible down the middle of the room, and she said, "Then we've both of us been hired by the same outfit, Eli Marsh, and the wages are bad and the work won't quit. I'm glad of the company." And she put her hand out over the table, palm down, just for a second on the back of mine, and took it back and got up and said good night. That was all. But I lay awake on my side of the wall a long time after, and it wasn't grief that kept me up, for the first time in 3 years. The winter was a hard one and we beat it. That's a plain sentence, and it holds more than a man can say. We fed through January in snow to the cattle's bellies, the two of us breaking sled trails out to the herd before light, throwing hay till our arms gave out. And we lost only the 4 old keepers we'd already counted as lost. When a calf came early and wrong in a February blizzard, she and I worked over that cow half the night in the barn by lantern light, her arms into the shoulder, me holding the lantern and the cow's head and praying in a way I hadn't since Margaret, and we saved them both, the cow and the calf. and we stood there after in the steam of it, both of us soaked and shaking, and Susanna started to laugh, just tired, just glad, the first time I'd heard her laugh outright, and I laughed too. And we stood in that barn at 3 in the morning laughing like a pair of fools at a living calf, and somewhere in there, though I couldn't have told you the moment, the line down the middle of the house got a good deal harder to see. Spring came the way it does up high all at once, the fork running brown and loud with snowmelt, and the grass coming green up the south slopes near overnight. And with the spring came a thing I hadn't reckoned on. Susanna had her standing now, her name, her safety. The claim money came through in April. The land office paid her out a small sum for the improvements her husband had made before the state took the ground back, and it was hers, free and clear, and it meant she could go. She could buy a little place of her own somewhere lower and warmer, or take the stage east to whatever family she had left, or do any of a dozen things that didn't include 1,000 cold acres under Iron Mountain and a gruff widower she'd married for a roof. The bargain we'd struck was met. She'd been paid. There was nothing on God's earth holding Susanna Coyne to my place but her own free will. I knew it the day the money came. I watched her open the land office's letter at the table and read it and fold it careful and put it in her apron, and I felt the floor go out from under me the way it had the Tuesday Margaret died, and I understood all at once and too late that somewhere across that hard winter I had stopped wanting a hand and started wanting her, and that I had no earthly right to say so, because I'd promised her a business and a line down the middle of a house and her own say in all things. And a man who's given his word has given it. So I didn't say anything. I went on like a stump. I figured if she meant to go, she'd go, and the least I could do was not make it harder by mooning at her like a colt. We branded that spring, and she was the best help I ever had at it. We rode the high country together, checking the herd up onto the summer grass. And all the while I was saying goodbye to her in my heart, a little every day, the way you'd say goodbye to good weather you knew couldn't last, and never letting it show, and feeling about 100 years old. It was Susanna who broke it. Of course it was. She was the braver of the two of us by a long way and always had been. We were up on the bench above the fork one evening in June, the two of us having ridden up to turn the last bunch onto the summer range, and we stopped to blow the horses and look at the country, which from up there ran off blue and gold to the edge of the world. And she said, not looking at me, looking at the country, "I've money now, Eli, and my name and my standing. The thing we shook hands on is all the way done." "I know it," I said. My voice didn't come out right. "You've earned out. You're free to go wherever you've a mind to. I'll drive you to the stage myself or to any place you want, and I had to stop. I'll be sorry to lose the hand," I said, which was the most cowardly true thing I have ever said, and we both of us knew it for what it was. She turned in her saddle and looked at me then, and her face, I'd watched that face go from a stranger's to the first thing I looked for every morning, and right then it had something in it I'd not seen before, something that scared me worse than the blizzard. "You'll be sorry to lose the hand," she repeated slow, like she was testing how it sounded, and it sounded as poor out loud as it had felt to say. "Eli Marsh, you are the stubbornest, closest-mouthed, most God-fearing coward of a good man I have ever met, and I have buried two of the people I loved best in this world, and I am not, I have decided, going to spend whatever I've got left waiting on you to find your tongue. So I'll find mine." She drew a breath. The horses shifted under us. The whole valley held still. "I don't want to go," she said. "I haven't wanted to go since the night that calf lived. I drew a line down the middle of your house because I'd been owned once by a marriage and would not be owned again, and I will tell you plain, I am still not for sale, not by the head and not by the acre, and I never will be. But a thing freely given isn't a thing sold. And I would give you the rest of my life if you wanted it of my own free choosing, with the line rubbed out and my name still my own. That's the whole of it. Now it's your turn, and so help me, if you tell me one more time you'll be sorry to lose the hand, I'll push you off this horse. I have been in my time, run at by a mad bull and caught out in lightning on open ground and snowed under for 9 days, and I was never in my life as scared as I was on that bench above the fork, nor as glad. I got down off my horse. My legs weren't entirely under me. I came around and stood at her stirrup and looked up at her, and I said the thing I'd been saying goodbye with for 2 months, only forwards this time. I stopped needing a hand somewhere back in that barn in February, I said. What I've needed since is you, Susanna, and I've kept my mouth shut on it because I gave you my word it'd be a business and your own say in everything, and I'd cut my own throat before I'd crowd you into anything. So I'll say it once and you do as you please with it, free, the way you've done everything since you drove up my road. I love you. I have for a while. I'd be honored past saying if you'd stay and be my wife in truth as well as in name. Your own woman, your own land, your own say. The line gone because we both rubbed it out and not for any other reason on earth. And if you'd rather go, I'll drive you to the stage with a smile on my face and bless you every day after, because you'll have given me one good winter, and that's more than I ever look to have again. She didn't push me off my horse. She got down off hers instead, careful, and she stood in front of me the way she had at the gate the first evening, not tall, but giving away not 1 inch of what height she had. And she reached up and put her hand flat against my face, the way she'd put it on the back of my hand at the table that December night, only this time she didn't take it away. There, she said, soft, and her eyes were full, but she wasn't crying, she was the furthest thing from it. There. The line's gone, we both rubbed it out. Was that so hard, you old granite-headed fool? Yes, I said. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And she laughed, that tired, glad laugh from the barn, and I put my arms around my wife on the bench above the fork with the whole blue and gold world running off to the edge of it. And I'll draw the curtain there, because some things are a man's own and not for telling, and because the preacher in Cawley had married us true the autumn before, paper and all, and there was nothing left undone but the choosing, and we had at last, the both of us, freely chosen. We were married 29 years after that bench above the fork, married in name longer, but it's the choosing I count from. I'll not pretend they were easy years. We lost cattle and we lost a crop of hay to an August hailstorm that took it flat in 20 minutes, and we buried Prout and we buried the preacher. And there was a stretch in the middle where the price of beef fell so low we near lost the place, and only her bookkeeping and her stubbornness held it. We never had children of our own, that door had shut for the both of us before we ever met, but we raised 2 after a fashion. A pair of orphaned cousins of hers that came to us off the train when their folks died, half grown and half wild, and Susanna set them straight the way she set everything straight, with work and fairness and no nonsense, and they grew up good and went off into the world and named their own children after us, which is a kind of going on, I've come to think, as real as any. She kept her land in her own name to the last day, and her say in all things, and I never once wanted it otherwise. A marriage where both have stand on their own feet is a stouter thing than one where one half leans, I've found, and ours stood through everything the mountain threw, which was plenty. The line down the middle of the house was a story we told the cousins to make them laugh, and they never could believe their gruff old uncle and their iron-spined old aunt had ever lived as strangers under one roof, and the truth is, by then, neither could we. She went the way she did everything, on her own terms and without complaint this last winter, when the cold got into her chest and wouldn't come out. She was 71. She made me promise I'd not sit in the house and rot the way I'd done after Margaret. You did that grief already, Eli. You don't owe it twice, she said, near the end, still bossing me, thank God, and she said to bury her up on the bench above the fork, where the line got rubbed out, and to plant nothing fancy, just let the grass have her, the good high grass we'd held together against the mountain all those years. So that's where I dug it, this morning in the snow, an old man with a sound back yet for all his years, and a heart that's broke before and learned it can mend. I stood up there a while after, where I could see the whole valley run off blue and gold under the cloud, the country she'd loved and learned better than I ever did, and I said to her what I should have said on this very bench 30 years gone, and was too much a coward to, that I never needed a hand at all, not really, that what I'd needed was somebody to want the morning to come for. And that she'd given me 10,000 mornings, every one of them freely chosen, hers and mine both, the line gone, our own two stubborn names side by side to the end. The snow's coming down soft now over the new-turned ground, and the grass'll have her come spring, the way she wanted. I told her at the gate, that first cold evening, that I needed a ranch hand more than a wife. It was the only lie I ever told Susanna Coyne, and I didn't even know it for one when I said it, and I have spent 30 winters glad past telling that she saw clean through it, climbed down off that wagon, and went and put her cow in my barn anyhow.